All right. I'm not sure. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out this evening. I'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. And yeah, so welcome to the Planning Commission. I feel like we just had this meeting, but here we are again around the table. So thank you for coming out on an extra night. We really appreciate it.
We're glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And we are here to discuss, review the project status of the fiscal year 2020 through 25 CIP, and we'll just hop right to it. I think John Irish is, hello.
Hello. Well, welcome to Planning Commission and Town Council. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to do an overview, as we have every year for a while, the mid-year status of the FY 2025 Capital Improvement Program. And I'm Deputy Director of Public Works, and I want to start off with just a little bit of what I call the basis of how these projects actually work their way through the town's processes. And we just kind of generally call it a project model, and not all of the information, these first two slides, will apply to every single CIP project, but it does give you a general framework of how we handle it. So professional services just refers to the fact that in a lot of these projects we seek outside assistance from professional consultants, engineers, architects, and others. And usually the project definition, as you would probably know, starts somewhere in the very early parts of the CIP process. They can come from numerous sources. They are always tried to be reflective of a part of the comprehensive plan of the town. As we work through the definition, becomes the concept, and then we will go into a much more detailed design specifications, and that then at point comes the project into reality of looking to acquire any right-of-ways or easements we may need, relocating utilities if necessary, on into the bidding, which is the contract package, and as we get to that point, we will advertise it for contractors to do the work if we're not doing the work ourselves, and that results in a contract award, which is done by the town council. We then give the notice to proceed to the contractors and start the actual project and through to completion. And then there's a closeout procedure that involves, depending on the project, final inspections, punch lists, final project documentation, etc. And again, this is just a little bit more definition of what can happen under these different sections of a project. As you can see, there can be all sorts of activities, and not all of these, of course, apply to every project, but they can go from planning and feasibility to budget estimates, zoning issues, public information meetings if necessary. Sometimes it's not even a built project. We'll be doing what's called RFP development or request for proposals. In that case, that may be a multi-phase project where we do a first phase just getting to the point of developing a concept, and then that stop at that point if it's determined it's not a project that we need to go forward with, or we continue on into the design efforts, which vary, of course, and get more detailed, and on into what we call the construction or construction administration side. So with that being said, what I want to do is go through the current FY 2025 CIP and basically an update of what has been accomplished on the main ones between January of last year and December of this past year. And we broke it down into kind of some common denominators. So the first is the downtown area projects. The one thing you'll notice in a lot of these, you've seen these projects before, a lot of you, and we are getting very close to actually seeing work that's visible and will make people realize that all the time and effort that's happened before it is coming to fruition. So downtown streetscapes phase 3, the Eldon Center intersection, the Eldon Monroe intersection are all currently in some phase of the right-of-way acquisition. Right-of-way acquisition also can have very many parts to it, and that can be, in this case, acquiring easements primarily, and a little bit of right-of-way that we need to construct the projects. And the process there is we do an analysis that can include a formal appraisal or a in-house appraisal. We do title reports and then put together offer letters to go to the property owners and then enter negotiations if it's required. The utility undergrounding project is kind of in a semi-lull right now. That is still on the docket. The design is basically about 99%. There are a few pieces and parts that we have to finalize, and then that would be ready to schedule for construction, or to schedule the work of actually taking the overhead wires and putting them into the underground duct banks. Part of that reason that it hasn't moved any faster is some of these projects that you see there have construction work that will complete that undergrounding duct bank to make the whole raceway, for lack of a better term, available to put the wires into. The Metro Rail improvement projects, this is primarily around the H-Top area. Trails to Metro is from Van Buren, or the end of Willgate at Van Buren, over to the Pavilion. That has been completed and designed for a while. We have one sticking piece on the easement. Herndon Parkway Van Buren intersection is also in the right-of-way acquisition phase and utility relocation. Metro Rail bus bays, those utility relocations should start this month, so we'll start seeing some actual activity there. And then Van Buren Complete Streets is also in the right-of-way and utility relocation phase. Some of the other CIP projects underway, the two big ones, the Herndon Parkway Spring Street intersection project, that is administered by VDOT, and that's why we separate them, meaning that we are relying on VDOT to do the coordination, the design work, and all of the activities we typically would do. So we are in just a adjunct coordination and funding side of those two projects. Both of those are in the process in varying stages of the right-of-way acquisition and the utility relocations. Those projects are on schedule from previously. With the Herndon Street project, I believe, is scheduled now for a start date at around 23, 24, and the Herndon Parkway Spring Street in 21, 22, I believe. The WNOD Trail Phase 2 lighting was completed this year. That was from basically Crestview to Ferndale. We installed an emergency generator here at the HMC, which is primarily a backup permanent generator for the IT server room and emergency facilities like lighting, emergency lighting, fire alarm. Downtown sidewalk replacements, part of the sidewalk and minor trail CIP. We did this year basically the Pine Street, no, I'm sorry, I have a typo. Center Street from Station to down just past the library, the WNOD Trail. We completed for our water and sewer folks the 3rd Street water tank painting and rehabilitation. The Shannon Park Trail, which is part of the Trails to Metro network, was completed this year as well. The police department server room and computer room HVAC upgrade has been in design phase. We are hopefully going to be able to get that out for advertisement sometime, hopefully before the end of this fiscal year, so before June. We did some reconfiguration for the community development folks upstairs, and there was a Sugarland Run sewer relining. And then some of the non-CIP projects, as we call it, and believe it or not, some of these, the first two in particular, quite a bit of time and effort on all parts of the department. The Vivacity Smart Poles and Wi-Fi installation, which was significant, and we started and completed a town Countywide Security Initiative Assessment. We've got the final report, and we'll be meeting next week with our committee to establish next steps there. Fortunately, this year we were able to pave, and this is just a listing of streets that got paved. You can see there's a lot of backlog from last year. And then going forward, some of the things that we're looking to do, and you will notice this is very much just a snapshot picture of our FY 2025 project summary sheet. And I have here outlined all of those individual projects, and if you would like, I can go through them individually, or if you would like, I can also take questions on those in particular. What we are also looking at is downtown projects in 2025, the phase 3 streetscapes, Center and Eldon, Monroe and Eldon. A lot of this is continuation of what we mentioned earlier. We are also working on a water main replacement on Center Street between Locust and Nash. On Monroe Street, Eldon to Oak is in the works. We have private development going on at Residence at the Station. The Herndon downtown redevelopment is also going on. All these are taking, time and effort from your staff here at the town. Stream restoration for Sugarland Run South is in the design phase. And then next year, going forward, we have the Jefferson, Adams, Jackson, Madison, and Quincy Street scheduled. And the undergrounding, as I mentioned, is scheduled for those locations. I believe that brings us to a close. So if there's anything in particular back on this sheet of the details that you would like to go over, or any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Sure. Bill and then Sydney?
Yeah, just in regards to the itemized 40 some odd projects, a basic thing, for example, the ones that are on hold all have zero encumbrance, so I would imagine that's a budgetary way, except for number 11. I was just wondering, wayfinding signs and historic markers, 265 and 125 allocated. What's the
That is essentially, the 265 was what was originally estimated for the need. We have spent $125,000 to date on the historic signs. The wayfinding signs have been on hold with the intention of waiting to make it more comprehensive with the downtown development and how those things were going to be played out, and then to try to marry the wayfinding signs to work with the end result of the downtown development.
Makes total sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Sydney?
The residences at the station, which, all of the names sound very similar to me, so I'm not really sure which one that is.
That's on Jefferson Street,
Behind
between
Pines.
Jackson and Monroe, behind the Pines.
Got it, okay. And then the other question is, the order of the projects, and I know we've discussed this before, and I apologize, I can't remember why we do it this way, but why aren't they in order of what's being, done first? Why are they?
You mean the order of the numbering?
The CIP number.
The numbering comes from, I guess history is the best way to describe it, meaning projects that have been there for a while got numbered in the sequential order. They have a project number that's specific to the CIP, and actually, if I'm misstating this, you folks can speak up, Dan.
Yeah, we're gonna lay it out in functional areas this time around. It's gonna, next time around, or coming up soon, that we're working on, we'll be presenting to you. So we'll go with the functional areas like multimodal transportation and enhancements, government facilities, infrastructure, stormwater management, parks and recreation, so we'll do a little bit more that way.
I don't know.
We're gonna group them by functional area and then number them in functional area.
And will the numbering be, you know, what's being done first, or will it be
It's
some
not
random-
sequential by
It's-
the priority or anything of that nature.
Okay.
It's just a control number for us to give them. Why not number project 6, and we'll do project 6. We're on the same page.
Thanks.
Jen?
I just have a minor question, so on page, so on this page, help me out with like number 10, so Trails to Metro Rail, where it says estimated reserves,
Okay.
but then there's nothing spent, and then it says total cost is the.
Yes. First of all, this will change when you see this upcoming year's CIP, but what the estimated reserves was intended to show was how much dollars had been previously allocated from a source, either general funds or grants, that had not been spent. So
Okay.
it was sitting there available to spend.
Allocated to that, yeah.
And then the budget year, if it is, the zero shows that we would not anticipate spending any of those monies in that fiscal year. And that the dollars would be spent out. Now, in the case of Trails to Metro, the reason that shows zeros all the way across is that project was intended to be under construction this past year. And therefore, all the dollars that have not been spent are sitting there, and because of the right-of-way concerns that we have with one of the property owners, we haven't been able to move the project forward at the schedule it was intended.
Okay, so the fact that it still shows it for cost, like, cause it feels like estimated cost should be zero, even though we have the reserves, but you're saying
Well, it doesn't say estimated cost, it says estimated.
at the end, the last column. that's all
Oh,
I'm getting at.
estimated total cost?
Yeah,
That is just to show the representative that of all the funds that have been assigned to that project,
yeah,
that just shows what is actually out there for the end of the project. How much, when we get to the end, we will have spent either all of that 1.065, or we'd be over and have a shortfall, or we would do it for less with good bids, and then you'd have excess that could be assigned to something else.
okay.
Let me-
I
let me
find
just
that a
go-
little
Let me
confusing.
just go to the actual, so if you look at Trails to Metro, actually, there's, that snapshot of the first page we were on is not as accurate as this right here.
Uh-huh.
So we have 565,000 of funding for that portion of the Trails to Metro. Because the CIP on that cover sheet was also reflecting Shannon Park was in there, because that's a
Mhm.
Trails to Metro section. That is now complete, so the money that was assigned was $500,000 of hand sand money. So that goes from $1,065,000 to $565,000. So this year, that reserves number would be the 565, because that's been allocated and encumbered by grants. So right now, that's where this actually sits, at $565,000 for the trail that goes from World Gate and the World Gate over to the pavilion.
Okay, so
Right,
when
yeah.
are we gonna fill out the details in the chart then? Like, I hear what you're
Well-
saying, it just, it
Well,
doesn't
things-
align with
Things move
what
and
we're
change
reflecting.
within a year,
Yeah.
so when we're doing a mid-year report, that first page reflects what was happening as of January, well, actually, it would've been when it was approved in May
Okay,
of 2019. In the interim, we've completed and spent monies for part of that project. That was Shannon Park Trail.
mhm,
So that will then get reflected in our next CIP that will be presented here shortly, and it will show, instead of that 065,
it'll
it'll show
update with that
565.
565, okay.
Other questions? Planning Commission? Anything for us? Cesar?
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Always good information, thank you. I just want to be certain I'm aligned on some of this. So, back to page 3, all those can be considered active stages, so a CIP is in one of those stages, correct?
Yes, it should be. I can't say unequivocally 100%, but 95 to 99%, I would say yes.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is, as we go through this, and let's start on page 10, slide 10. What would help me, and maybe I'm dense and don't get this, but another column that might signify how long has number 7 been in an on-hold status pending funding.
Okay.
Because I think as we start looking at budgeting and priorities, if this is something we want, or it's been on there for, I don't know, 5 years, or let's say crazy 10 years, then maybe it's something we don't want. And maybe it's something that we can devote other resources towards as opposed to constantly rolling in. So, does that make sense? Just an additional column? And
It makes sense, but I would just say that I understand the backwards looking versus the forward looking. The CIP right now is presently formatted with the forward looking, so you do see that snapshot of if there's a project that has got funding for whatever reason, but it's not actually gonna happen until future years, that shows up. To show the reverse or the back history, trying to think of how you could do that in a simple one column is the only thing.
well, use a combination then, because the stage, I should know this, but I don't know if CIP 7 is in a stage, whether it's just on hold in what stage, or pending funding on what stage.
Yeah, I hear what you're asking.
Okay.
There is a piece of that information that is in the CIP project sheet. If you look at the individual project sheets.
No, I have that. I'm just saying, at this point, if you're presenting this for us to consider, it just might be helpful to have those additional columns.
Do you mean like on page, have a column that would reflect which number on page 3 it is, like project definition, design
Yeah,
specifications,
has
et
been
cetera?
stuck there.
Like 1 through 8?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say it could be hold at any
Right.
stage.
Right, and it could be hold for
Well, I think
a year or 5.
if that's something that's feasible to do, I think it makes sense because, I mean, if we're stuck, if it's been there for 5 years in number 2, that says something. But if it's 7 and maybe that's something that we could go ahead and push forward.
Right.
But I don't know I know this is a more complicated document than just
Well,
simple columns that Melissa.
just-
Yeah,
Just
and
aside-
just to piggyback, I mean, sometimes it's not exactly linear either.
Right.
I
I
get
think
that.
that's where that could be a rather difficult process. There's not as always with construction projects and grants and all the other parts that make these projects happen, a linear process.
Yeah, I get that that's a possibility. That's why if it's stuck in a stage for a reason, for a long duration, then we can
We could
either.
look at the reason
Yeah,
why.
exactly.
Well, then perhaps, because tonight's purpose is to look and see what we've done last year and what's upcoming
Right.
this budget year, correct? Because we're about to start budgeting, as somebody said. But when we come back in, is it in the summer when we start looking at this? So right after the budget is passed, we look at this comprehensively, and maybe that's the time where we dig deeper into these things and make sure. That also gives you some time to figure out what might be workable. Does that make sense?
I mean, essentially, what we're trying to present tonight is a snapshot of where we are in the fiscal year. And yes, it does not have the in-depth that you'll see when we do the CIP development.
Sure.
But I'd just like to remind everybody, 10 years in a municipality is a blink. It sometimes takes a very long time. We didn't get the lighting on the W&OD trail like that. That took years of courting, and we've only gotten one section and, going to the second. So sometimes these projects, because it is difficult, and also the undergrounding of the utilities, I don't think anyone wants to take that off the list. So you gotta remember that sometimes you're trying to get all the projects together, and if it's your house, you can kind of make a decision, but when you're coordinating all these different moving parts, I would hate to see us taking things off just because they've been there a little while, and the time just wasn't right to get it done.
Well, I don't think that's what's being suggested. I think it's just having the ability to have the conversation about, is it something that needs to be taken off, or is it something that's stuck because of all of the complications that you just mentioned? Sean?
That was the point.
Thanks. The 2 projects that are metro area, I think number 10 is the trails and 13 is the bus bays. I think one of them says that its construction should be complete in 2020. The other one said it would start in 2020, but do you know how long that construction duration is?
The trail was intended to be completed by 2020. That will not take probably more than about 4 months to 6 months, depending on what time will take a lot longer. Our intent with the bus bays is to try to have that going out for bid sometime mid-year this year, June, July, assuming that our relocation utilities goes well. And that will probably be substantially complete, I want to say, if weather holds, et cetera, by the end of the year, but it could slide into the beginning of '21.
So is there a contingency plan if the metro opens without bus bays there to receive buses?
I honestly don't have an answer to you for that. I know that CD has had conversations with Fairfax Connector. I don't know what provisions may apply in that case, to tell you the truth. We can find out for you.
And then just a related question that maybe is too far down the line, but like, what is the thing that we think of as the trigger for the World Gate extension? The road there. Like, obviously, that's not, is there like a certain step in the development that would trigger that, or do we even know? I don't know who I'm asking right now. So I'm looking at the mayor.
It's in flux.
Yeah, okay.
I'll figure it out.
Technically, I would say it is a point in the development of the HTOP, when you hit a certain point and you start getting those traffic impact studies showing that you're going to have failures, that's when you would want to be able to move on the creation of that extension. That being said, though, due to the fact that you've got 3 property owners involved with existing buildings and parking there, coordination between those 3 is probably going to be interesting and a bit of a struggle. So the timing will be uncertain.
All right, okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Planning Commission. It's nice to see you guys. You are more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, but I am guessing that we would like to have a quick recess so that you guys can get on with your lives. And thank you all for being here. We
Thanks a lot, guys.
appreciate it.
And gals.
Let's take like a 5-minute recess here, guys.
Must watch this. It is relatively.
You're a lot, you have, sound like you have a.
Yeah, that's what I'm too. That's a good idea what you said, because, you know, selling to the federal government, if you have a multi-million-dollar plan, it's like, well, tomorrow my PBR does something I can push 90 days because it's going from C4 to C5. So it's just changing contracts completely, so that's gonna delay it. It's, the funding's there, it's just, they wanna make it encumbered money, and they don't wanna, it's a continuing resolution, because with continuing resolutions, you can't add staff. So, like, that's an example, you know, just at least know that, it's like a 90-day pending because.
So I'm wearing some.
Or it's a 120 days.
Yes, exactly, yep.
Especially when we come to these budget discussions.
I know.
Not to get some traction from the.
No, but you just need to know.
Yeah, it's just put it in context.
Yeah, sure. Because that's the other thing too.
And by the way, this is all.
I also don't think that it should be in an order that we can tell what's coming up next, because otherwise you have to read through the notes to figure out.
And that's the problem with government budgets to begin with, because they're so fluid that when you're always taking a snapshot, it could be, oh, you know, the general fund is down 30%. I mean, Bill's bid is back up in 2 months, but it's just taken out because of some, you know, water allocation to a water tower. And you don't know that.
So we had to
So
put
it's
it
just a
on
snapshot.
because of this, but it'll be right back in.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting.
Oh, no.
Stir the crap out of it.
Is there a document, I know that each one of these has a,
Corporate finance is a little easier,
John,
because,
is there a project,
Well, it's just, look.
so we, do
yeah.
you have the CIP
All day.
there, the binder?
There is a
And I get these things flow back and
That's what
forth.
my slide
Number on page 2 matches number
Well, I
on
have,
page
I have a
3.
slide problem, but, when you have the CIP in front of you, and
That's
you're
it.
looking at what we have on our.
My spreadsheet's matched.
Right.
It's off by 18 cents.
Keep it simple.
So it's
Right.
just exactly the same as what it shows, so we have it. All right, are we all back? I think we are.
Okay, guys, we're gonna reconvene. Next week, we have 2 presentations. One is a certificate of appreciation for Eric Fielding, who's stepping down from the ARB, and a proclamation to recognize African American History Month. Are there any comments or questions on this?
Is anyone reading any of those?
It says that Pradeep is reading African American History Month, and I don't know who's doing this
I think you
certificate of
can appreciate
appreciation.
Eric.
I think usually, do I do that?
Yeah.
I guess I usually do that. Okay.
He's a neighbor.
That's right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay, that's all good. All right, so we have next, I bet you all gasped when you got the agenda this week and saw all those public hearings on there. I know, I did when we were putting it together. But the first 12 ordinances relate to the transportation facility improvements on Van Buren Street from Spring Street to Herndon Parkway, and we've kind of gone through some of this before. The staff reports on all 12 will be concurrent. And next week, the staff reports will be concurrent as well, because it's basically the same story. But then we have to hold separate public hearings and roll call votes on each of those items. So I'm gonna give you that heads up. So with that, these are ordinances to authorize the use of eminent domain for the acquisition of temporary and power utility easements for Van Buren from Spring Street to Herndon Parkway on property owned by, I'm not gonna read all the names, but they're all listed there in your agendas.
They're on the map.
And they're on the map, that's right. So I will turn it back over to John Irish to walk us through this.
Well, good evening, and once again, as stated, this has been more or less covered when we had to do this process the last time in the phase 1. So this presentation here is the exact same information up to a certain point, but for public hearing purposes, we'll still go through the whole project location and its purpose, scope of it, which is multimodal in nature. It's in alignment with the Silver Line Metro Rail Station, as well as improving Alabama Drive, storm drainage improvements, and we'll be doing utility relocations, which is our primary driver for the reason we're coming to you tonight. If you recall, from Herndon Parkway up to Alabama Drive is considered phase 1, and that portion is funded through federal funds through VDOT, and there was a financing deadline at the time that we had to be very cognizant of, otherwise there was a possibility that we could lose funding because of not reaching a certain milestone, and that was the driver of the phase 1 eminent domain or certificates of take process. When we get to phase 2, which is from Alabama all the way up to Spring Street, what's driving this is, in this section, there are certain overhead utilities our friends Dominion Power owns that are currently in the right-of-way of the existing road, but once we relocate them to make the improvements, they end up needing to be relocated onto what is currently private property. So that means that we have to acquire easements for Dominion. We actually are the coordinators in that process, where we acquire the easements and then we assign them to Dominion. So the actual end result is an easement between the property owners and Dominion, but we facilitate it. Because of what is going on in phase 1 in the utility relocations, in order to be prepared and able to make it a complete project, we obviously need to be able to relocate those utilities. And we're now at a point, which Lori and Lisa will address specifically, where we need to move that forward in order to have that not become a hamstring effect to the overall project. So we still are doing the same process, but for a different reason. And I'll show you on this slide 3 remember, I had a slide similar to this for phase one the first time around. Gray just represents the individual properties of phase two. The red, which you could barely see, is the actual fee take areas or places where we are going to be taking right away for the project. 85% or more of what we're asking to do is actually take what's basically either a utility easement for Dominion, which would be the blue, or it could also be for storm water management, and then the green is for temporary construction easements. So, as I said, the majority of the reason we need these easements is on a temporary basis or for utilities, and we are not taking a whole lot of right away at all. The majority, as you can see, is up there at the intersection on the left-hand side with Alabama, and that was, as I described last time, there's sidewalk easements along that frontage down Van Buren, except for those two properties for some reason, which I can't give you an answer to. Again, timeline, as you can tell, this is also a long, ongoing project, started early back in 2011. And once we get this utility relocation started, which is hopefully within the next month or so, our plan is to be ready to advertise for construction sometime in late spring, so May, June, July timeframe, and start construction very shortly thereafter, with the intent of being complete by, I'd say, winter of 20. It could be obviously 2021 again. It's all dependent on how things go in the construction. That's the general overall schedule. So with that being said, I will turn this over to Lisa and Lori.
Okay, and Lisa's gonna turn it over to me. Good evening, nice to be here. So phase one of the project had 5 parcels. All of the certificates of take have been filed in regards to those, so we have secured title to all those properties. Phase two has 20 parcels, so quite a few more. The good news I guess I have to report is I have secured deeds from 3 of those property owners in phase two. It just so happens those property owners did not have mortgage lenders to deal with, so they could sign the deeds directly, and those will be recorded shortly and the money paid over to them. The remaining 12 are the properties that you see on the agenda. We had sent out the original offer letters to them anywhere from the end of August to the beginning of September of last year. So we did reach out to them that long ago. We did have several of them that are immediately reached out to us and started working through the process. What we're finding is it's the mortgage lenders. They have to sign off on the deed of easement, giving permission, and you have some place like Wells Fargo, the paperwork goes far away, and it's just hard to get the paperwork to be turned over from the lender. So we do have several owners, and I'm hopeful that perhaps one of them for sure will secure in short order, but for the others, they're not able to convey good title to the town because the lender's not signing off on the deed as well. So if you recall through the general condemnation quick take process, we have to show that the project is for a public use, that no more private property is going to be taken than is necessary, and that whole process starts out with that written bona fide offer, which I said went out in end of August, beginning of September. The term of art that you hear in the code is that there's been a bona fide but ineffectual effort to purchase the property. And we're to the point now where it's not been an effectual transaction, and that's the reason why we're recommending moving forward to authorize the condemnation. Some of the reasons that a locality can go forward with condemnation is that the locality and owner can agree on compensation or other terms to purchase a settlement. many of them, the owner is unable to convey valid title to the property. Part of the process initiates with the governing body authorizing the use of condemnation through a public hearing. And that is why we've had these on the agenda. We're asking for the authority to go forward with the condemnation. Before a certificate of take can be filed, there has to be an official notice to the property owner. That has to go out at least 30 days, no more than 45 days before we file a certificate. What we did is everybody, except for the 3 owners that I've received deeds from, the 12 owners received a notice from the town with a letter dated January 9th, notifying them of the intent to file the certificate of take. So that did start the clock. The earliest we could file the certificate is going to be about February 10th, and then the 15-day period, because of when the dates fall, we're looking at no later than February 21st. So we have that window in which to file the certificates. And I think, we've done other reach out to the landowners. All of the property owners, unless I had direct communication with them trying to resolve an issue, a letter went to them December 5th as well, saying, we're getting towards the end, you have until the 20th of December, to reach an agreement, otherwise we're gonna have to move forward with condemnation. So, they received that letter on dated December 5th, and then, like I said, they received the notice dated January 9th. The notice letter also in January let them know that the public hearing was occurring. So they've had plenty of notice just to know that the item is on the agenda for the 28th. I think to emphasize in this phase 2, there's one parcel that we need 14 square feet of right-of-way, and another parcel which we need 43 square feet of right-of-way. Everything else is going to be a permanent or temporary easement on the property. I don't know if you had any specific questions that I could answer.
I can add just a couple other points too before we go on. We've had other informal communications from the engineering department to these property owners throughout the process as well. Those were the formal legal notices.
Right, those were the formal,
There was a
right.
lot of,
Right.
like, Richard Smith I know was in contact with property owners on multiple occasions. Second thing is, one of the issues of the time criticality here is predicated on Dominion Virginia Power will not begin utility relocation on phase 1 until phase 2 is secured. They want to do it all at the same time. So we can't move the project forward at all until both phases are secured. Is just to remind you, this project has to be complete before we go to Spring Street, and that gets under construction, because that would affect traffic from that end of town on either side of Metro. So we have to have one of those avenues flowing more freely. We can't have both of them choked down simultaneously. That's why these things have a project dependency one to the next on these projects as well. But anyway, thank you.
Sydney.
I just wanted to let everybody know that I had a conversation with Lisa and Lori earlier today, and we discussed some of the letters. The terminology in the letters worried me, especially because there were so many of them, and they explained that most of the property owners, with the exception, I think, of one, were all on board. It was just a question of getting, because some of the terminology implies that they couldn't reach an agreement with the homeowner, but that actually, or the landowner, but that actually isn't really what
It's
it
written in the
means.
code.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so,
That was gonna be my question too. The hang-up here really is the mortgage company situation, not that the majority of these landowners are not willing to participate in this. Is that correct?
That's legally,
Okay.
they own the land, so
Right.
the banks.
Jen, and then Bill.
So, no, that's helpful, I appreciate that. So for St. Timothy's, like the biggest one,
Mhm.
is that they're in the same boat as well?
Yep, and
Or
I
is it the Catholic
actually.
Church that we're waiting, or no, they're Episcopalian, right? The
Yeah,
Episcopalian church that we're
they,
waiting?
right, churches in Virginia own title usually by trustees, so they're individuals that are appointed, and they're appointed by the court, the circuit court. I actually spoke to one of the trustees just the other day from them, and they touched base as to where they are one of the 3 trustees has not been appointed by the court. So there has to be a court order first doing that. And then actually the conveyance by the trustees has to be approved by the court, the circuit court. So they really need 2 court orders in order to secure the authority to convey. So he wanted to explain where they were with the process, knowing, knowing that, we may need to move forward. I don't think there'll be any bad feelings, he specifically said. But right, with the church, they have all these other steps, unless they're incorporated like any other company.
Yeah.
They have other hoops that they have
Yeah.
to jump through.
So then my other question would just be related to timing. I mean, I get it, we have to go through this part, and then what do we realistically think? Because if it all has to be completed before, like you said, phase 1 starts, what is our?
Before Spring Street starts.
Before Spring Street starts, sorry.
As I mentioned, the current schedule is to get the utility relocation started through, and just a fine point, the certificate of take gives us automatic ability to start work for the utilities to start work once that's filed and recorded. So once that happens, we are then able to go to utilities, like Phil mentioned, and authorize them to start their work. Now, we've got preliminary schedules that they've given us with the cost of the work to be done, but obviously if we can't tell them to go, the schedule is always gonna have that aspect to it. But start that within the next month or so. We are looking from their perspective of about a 2 to 3 month time frame for the utility relocations. In the meantime, while that's ongoing, once they have started and we've acquired the certificates of take, we can get the authorization to go out to bid from VDOT on phase 1, which again, for the same reason, we want to do it as a complete project. We will then also be able to advertise for construction on phase 2. So that hopefully will happen in the April-May timeframe. And then with that process, we've got reviews with VDOT, again, kind of drags things out, but trying to start construction sometime this summer, my guess would be at the earliest around July, maybe as late as September, and then completing probably within about a 6-month time frame from whenever we start construction.
Okay, great, thank you.
Bill, I think.
Yeah, and also for the benefit of people at home in regards to things like eminent domain, and I know Mr. Vagla has brought that up a few times. There's actually a report card out from the Institutes of Justice in regards to how states handle eminent domain and things of that nature. And my home state of New Jersey is a D, because they can basically say we want to redevelop something and they can go in there and take it and it's home rule and they can bulldoze and that's it. Virginia passed legislation back in 2006 that protects landowners. They have rights, and the reason why they didn't get an A is because they don't have a constitutional amendment. I mean, there's 3 states, I think, South Dakota, New Mexico, and one other that actually has a constitutional amendment in regards to eminent domain. Short of that, they're pretty protective of landowner rights, so I think that's important for people to understand as well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on any of these 12 items? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mayor. And just so I'm clear on where all this intersects, so of the ones that we're going to do the condemnation of, how many of those are actually held up or not responsive because of the mortgage lender?
All 12.
So it's all 12. So of
There's
those,
one party I did not hear from
Okay.
at all.
so all of these fit into that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
was. And with that, I gather that we're not really, overstepping anything here, and what our sort of legal universe is. We've done everything.
Yep, and again, like Mr. McKenna had said, that there are very strict procedures that we have to follow, in
There's no
regards
exposure.
to, right, we're following all the procedures set down in the code. It gives the owners plenty of notice. And even afterwards, we file the certificate of take, we get the feasible title, so we can do exactly what we need to on the project. And then we still have to work out the compensation afterwards. So there is another process after the certificate is filed that we get the property owner's agreement before the money is released to them.
And that's a battle with potentially the mortgage lender.
Not necessarily, it's more with the homeowner, the mortgage lenders signing off on the actual title to the property.
And does that require council action when we actually convey the money to the homeowners?
No, this is part of this.
That's part of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only if there's a dispute about the amount.
Gotcha.
Then
Now-
another action is filed for
I
a
just
judge.
didn't know if we had
a
another
jury.
step to go through to make this whole.
We do have a final step where you will see some of these again, because you heard John Irish mention that we're going to be conveying title to these easements back to Dominion.
Mhm.
We obtain them, and at a later point, it will be conveyed to Dominion. We have done that probably every year for some sort of project
Mhm.
since I've been here. I know of times prior as well.
Okay.
So it's not an unusual step.
And that'll require a public hearing.
So again, these are both temporary and permanent
Yes.
methods, so.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. So, next up are the general items, and the first one is a resolution to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission's 5-year review of the comp plan. This was continued from our public hearing back on January 14th, and Dana Heiberg is here, our senior planner. Glad you're feeling better. I know you were under the weather at
Yes.
our last meeting, so glad you're on the mend.
Much.
For the staff report.
Okay, well, I'll keep it brief. We basically had quite a lot of input from you and a number of points that we worked through with trying to articulate some language on the points that you brought forth. And we have laid those out for you. You have that in front of you. I could just hit some highlights and see what your feedback is on our language. So we're talking about the further resolve clauses. The first one we had added, the point was made to support the arts and the arts-related activities with future amendments to the comprehensive plan. The second paragraph was on workforce and affordable housing, just serving distinct groups, and so forth. I think we captured your thought there. The third one was on renewable energy infrastructure. So hopefully we caught the drift on that one. Let's see, the fourth one, I'm not sure that was new. That's about the heritage resources and the update of the town's policies to reflect updated guidelines and policy guidance that are currently being formulated. I don't know that that was new. Let's see, we have some new language with future amendments. Basically, the next two items related to comments, awareness and the need for the town to take a proactive role in support of small businesses, and then the next paragraph, the idea of retention, fostering success of businesses, and other things to be included in future economic development chapter. So we heard that, I think we captured that. I don't think the next paragraph was new, that was about multimodal. Not sure if I think we, I have some amplification language in the next one about multimodal transportation initiatives, emphasizing walkability and as well as bikeability, and capitalizing on the WNOD trail and mixed uses, and so forth. Hopefully that captured your thoughts. Let's see, number 9. I think we articulated some further language there relative to unique sense of place, public and private spaces, landscape architecture, and so forth. Hopefully that captured your thoughts. The next point was comprehensive plans, future land use map. The last 2 points basically related to your input about the designation of the term redevelopment area. And so the next to the last point, it says the future land use map will be amended to include the designation of redevelopment area along with the term adaptive, and to highlight areas designated by small area plans as appropriate for redevelopment with expanded legend. And then, so that's one sort of type of action, and then the next point is to, in the future, when the comprehensive plan is rewritten and replaced, the term adaptive would be replaced by redevelopment area, and the mapping and text would provide enhanced explanation, and so forth and so on. So I hope we captured your direction there, but that's what we heard at your work session, and I'd be happy to continue to work on it or discuss it.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Thank you for listening.
I do like the use of adaptive redevelopment area, if I understand this correctly. And thank you for taking my requests into consideration. I did think that we had discussed earlier and decided we weren't gonna use the word heritage instead of historical anymore, just because of the possible connotations of heritage as opposed to historical. I don't know if you were here.
We're
when we
coming
did
back
that.
to you with that. We're working on what it would take to switch over.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Lynn.
We're close. We're close to coming back to you.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? Anybody?
Nice job.
All right, thank you guys, really
Thanks,
appreciate it. It's definitely worth the extra couple of weeks.
They're helping us back in January. Quite get there.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was a thing.
Next item is a resolution to provide the town manager with town council guidance on our 2021 budget. This was discussed by council at our January 7th work session, and we gave some guidance to staff and asked them to return with a resolution, and that's what they have done. So, oh, Jenny, I didn't see you back there.
Hiding out in the corner.
You can't hide.
Garden
Right,
door.
but you
It's
can't
the
hide.
hair.
Garden door.
So, this resolution took your guidance into consideration, and so, hopefully it's in your package. And the priorities, again, are along the lines of everything we've been talking about, to include, with you, addressing the impacts of the transportation projects and the redevelopment projects associated with downtown, implementation of the redevelopment of downtown, the Arts Center, advancing the sustainability plan, maintaining our focus on the use of technology. On the next page, you'll see funding activities that demonstrate a commitment to an investment in the employees, which is, you know, emphasis on maintaining a competitive employment position, addressing rising healthcare and pension costs, employee skill development. Second semester starts tomorrow for me in MPA school, as I call it, so thank you. And then, you know, again, continue with the efforts to maintain our strong fiscal position, so passing a budget that addresses the rising costs associated with quality service delivery. We're gonna continue the multi-year revenue and expenditure projections, life cycle maintenance, again, balancing water and sewer service revenue with the operating costs, and addressing some of the increasing infrastructure issues that we're seeing with water and sewer. So hopefully that encapsulates all of your feedback. And if so, then this will be before you next week for passage. Okay. Thank you.
One of the elements we tried to do here is we drew up to the top of the list the transportation, because that's gonna be a pretty significant question as we're looking at some of the shortfalls and some of the out-year projects. That's gonna be probably coloring a lot of our world in So we wanted to try to put that in kind of an order. The other one that really jumped, and I wanted to make sure we were on here, is the water and sewer revenue and operating costs. The commodity charges are going up. The infrastructure, we're trying to get a good handle on right now. We're seeing a lot of breaks right now in areas we didn't anticipate them to be. And so we're looking at that, and we've asked Jen Davenport last week to recalibrate the fiscal forecasting model for water and sewer with these ideas in mind. To look at, we have a rate study underway. We're going to take that rate study information, marry it to some of these cost model changes, and so we'll be back in this budget with adjustments, probably more aggressive than we had originally anticipated, but we're working on that right now.
Questions?
Yeah, with the water main breaks that we've been having, do we have a schedule of when things were put in and how old they are? Or is that something that is just popping up now when something wears out? I mean, if we do this for.
Tam's hiding over there.
Oh, good. If we do this for trucks and I think we should, and I'm really proud of you guys for working on that, but I think we should do that for.
We, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff has not gotten memorialized properly. What we thought we had were surprised. Case in point, the Crestview break. When we arrived on scene, when we were waiting for Miss Utility and we were preparing to start digging, we anticipated that pipe to be 12 feet deep, and I forget what the material we thought it was down there. And we were going to look for shoring material, I think, because we can't put a person in a 12-foot ditch without putting shoring material in there. Come to find out, it was about 5 feet deep, and it was cast iron, which was unexpected. So it wasn't what we thought it was, or just deep as we thought it was.
Yeah.
So there's holes in the knowledge we are hoping to address. So what you're going to see in this upcoming budget is more investment in GIS to start filling some of those gaps, so that we have that data on a map that we're able to then provide some level of managerial analysis and to get in front of things like this.
So how is GIS gonna help us, or is it older?
As we inventory and as we look at things, and it'll be part of this data gathering, and we're gonna put it into a logical way so it goes with us forward. So it lasts beyond me, lasts beyond Scott, lasts beyond Tammy.
But then after that,
After that, it's your done.
Okay, thank you.
So it lasts in perpetuity.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the resolution? Does it reflect what we wrote?
But
Yeah.
not on this is fine, but conceptually, when we think about, I think where you were going with this, predictive, or is there something we can proactively assume stuff's gonna break? Where are we in terms of, have we been kind of budgeting for that, or assuming, and if so, how far, or?
Yeah, there's always been the CIP, certain amount of pipe replacement in a given year that's kind of conceptualized. I'm not exactly sure we have enough data to say, should that pace be faster, should it be slower, is it just right? Are we replacing the right pipe, or replacing the right places? I'm unsure, and it's not me, it's actually that poor guy right there, Mike Farr, who needs more data to kind of understand that.
I
So
would
we
say,
can feel a little better.
for me, be aggressive with that, because I much rather address it here than.
100%.
Being
100%.
reactive with that.
The prior council, as a mandate, in fact, last budget we submitted was based upon being, factoring in planned obsolescence and things of that nature. Because equipment breaks, people retire, things like that.
Steel dust.
That's right. Stuff happens.
I
Yeah,
found
it
a
does.
cast iron pipe in my upstairs bathroom when we were redoing it. That was fun. So I feel your pain. Other questions
Did
or
you expect it
comments?
12 foot deep?
That's crazy.
It was hanging on by a thread, actually. I can't believe it didn't fall through the floor, so. Old house living is not for the weak. Other questions or comments on the budget guidance? Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jeff.
We're back at the end.
All right, the next item is also related to our upcoming budget, is the resolution to amend the fee schedule at Chestnut Grove Cemetery. And Cindy Roder and,
Introduce.
yeah.
Introduce Dave.
You know Cindy, I'm Dave Roscoe, I'm the cemetery manager. For
Nice
all
to
of
see you.
who have met
Hello,
me
sir.
once or twice and haven't seen me in a few years.
We'll be talking soon.
I am gonna pass out a secondary piece of paper for you guys to kind of review. It's gonna give some background as to why we're doing what we're doing in these fee changes. I'll wait till they kind of work their way around really quick. So what we do is a 3-year review of our fee structure to make sure that we're in line with the service engine that the town wants us to be within the community. We do a review of 8 cemeteries within the area. Now, I will put the caveat out there that one of the independent cemeteries has changed to corporate since this was done a month ago. So you can expect that this will look a little bit different if we were to have real-time numbers. But they haven't changed their fee structure yet, so it's still legitimate. So we kind of go through an apples for apples offering structure to see what is out there within the industry, because not all cemeteries offer the same types of burials, same type of cremation products and all of that. So we keep it to an apples and apples representation here. We basically lay out where we're at, where the rest of the industry is at, and then make our adjustments accordingly. Most of these are very minor, and there is a breakdown of the actual, to kind of make it a little bit more concise on page 2 in red. There's a breakdown of the changes that we're having. The numbers in the parentheses are what we're increasing to. So most of these are minor that will just be represented in the actual columns. You'll see, oh, that makes sense, we're going from, you know, the rest of the industry is doing a $500 overtime fee for after 2 p.m. We're $200 shy. We need to just kind of level that out. Our position has always been to be a little bit more on the affordable side of median, so that's kind of where we rebalance. Now, the biggest change within this is going to be in our cremation products, our land burials, in our different areas for cremations, because that percentage of the industry is growing so much. Currently, right now, Virginia is at about 42%. Chestnut Grove is at about 35, maybe 36%, and it's been steadily increasing, and I don't see it slowing down. So in the future, we will have some alternative cremation products, an expansion of our cremation yard and all of that, but none of that is there at this time. It's kind of in the building stages. But you will see the largest jumps that we have in our cremation lines, because what's happening is we're getting more rights of interment, so that's an additional burial within a single site that's already been pre-purchased, or our cremation land sites are being purchased at a higher rate than our traditional burial. So at the end of the year, we're doing the same amount of interments, but we're having a much smaller revenue share because the products are just less expensive. Yeah. Now, that's good and bad. The adjustment will take care of the financial side on some of that. The second rights of interment are a positive for us because it extends our life cycle, if you will, where we don't have to develop new land to be able to offer those to families for multiple rights of interment. So it just allows us to continue to offer burial options for folks. We are at about 420 traditional sites left in our current developed cemetery. We sell about 105 rights mixed between new and additional rights. So that'll give you an idea about kind of where we are as far as future forecasting for saleable inventory right now. Those numbers are a little bit skewed because we do have cremation niches and things like that, which is much smaller pieces of land. It's like multiple units in a small area, so it does kind of drive the years a little bit better, but we're kind of in, you know, a development. We're going to be getting into a development cycle here pretty soon because we're going to need it for the continuation of our services.
And if there's another point I can make, and it's something Dave brought up to me in a recent meeting, is that some of the sites that are remaining are not what we would call our premier sites. They haven't sold or can sit on the books or on the inventory because they're not really what folks are necessarily looking for. Mm-hmm. So they're on the books as in the inventory, but how sellable they are is left to be determined.
And some of those sites are going to be reclaimed for us to be able to do development in that area to make it more presentable for folks. if all of you are familiar with the cemetery, the back section, section 12, that's very close to the parkway, doesn't sell. It's where the old lean-to used to be. It's a gravel road. It's hard to grow grass. Anytime we do get it going and we put a burial in there, we set ourselves back, and it's just restarting. So we have to kind of reimagine what are we going to do in that area to make it, you know, presentable for families and to make it a dignified place for folks to want to bury. So we have to reclaim some of that inventory, put some money into it, and then resell it at whatever price for whatever product line we've decided to do there. So it's kind of a fluid industry, but you know, I think it's something the town should be proud of. We do a good job there, and we've gotten nothing but praise and accolades from the community. So I'll be proud. Thank you. Invest. If you want me to go down through all of this, I can. If it seems pretty straightforward, that's fine. If you have any questions of the greater cemetery industry, I'm your guide.
Thank you. Pretty, you had a question or comment?
I don't have question, but I have comments.
Sure.
I really love the way you did the comparison with the other areas, and then whatever the fee increase we're trying to do here is in the red color, and that color coding is also good. And then I was just looking at the apple-to-apple comparison. It makes sense. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see.
What is the long-term, and this may not be new, but what is the long-term plan for that land once we've sold out, which I assume we will eventually do?
Well, we have about 3.5 acres of land that's undeveloped right now, and we have a 1/2 acre we have to set aside for spoils pile and maintenance facilities. So we've got about 3 acres that we can develop, and we're in talks right now about putting in some drainage, tying into the system that joins us on the back of the property lines, foresting out that entire area, raising the grade up. It's 18, 20 feet, something like that, and giving us a kind of a blank green canvas for future development. So there's about 109 lots. A cemetery lot is 12 in our standard layout. There's about 109 lots that we get from an acre, so we'll have 3 acres. And I think the last time I kind of put the numbers together, I think if we do a development and we turn it all into traditional burial site, but we won't do that, obviously, we'll have mixed offerings. But if we were to lay it out for traditional burial site, just with a standard interment right and 1 interment fee, it's like $21 million in revenue, and it extends our life cycle by 35 years or something like that. So there's definitely the opportunity for us to kind of continue our momentum here.
That's very helpful. Didn't realize we had that much space that was undeveloped.
Nobody knows we have that much space.
Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify, you said when you looked at these and drew up this increase, you kind of a little bit conservative and skewed more to the lower, I forget the word you used. What would that look like if you skewed that percentage the other way?
Well, I would have to put the numbers together for you. Now, when I
And
first...
and I'm not suggesting you do that, I'm just
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud here, because Herndon's not necessarily a lower income
Right.
community. So I'm just using that as.
So the idea that was, when I first came on here, when I spoke with the then town manager, was that when the town took over the cemetery from the association back in '97, that it was kind of decided that they wanted this to be a service entity as opposed to more of a profit engine, if you will. And figuring now that, I don't know how much you know about the cemetery industry, but there's a fair bit of exploitation that goes on people's grave. So having an identity where we're not just saying we're service oriented, we kind of have the numbers that show, hey, you know, this is the average, this is where we are because this is important for us to present it to you in that way. That was the rationale behind it. If we went a little bit to the right, would it make that much of a difference? don't know. You know, I'm the face when people come in. I'm not usually the guy going in, so I don't know if it would affect it too much. I mean, we have a lot of heritage in our cemetery, so I don't think our numbers would be affected too much, but we do get a fair bit of people that come out and they shop and they go to different cemeteries and see what their prices are and what their, you know, their general offerings are. And more times than not, they come back, you know. And a part of that offering, you know, when families come in and do that, there's an extension of sharing our knowledge just as part of the town. You know, I tell folks, if we don't have what you have in mind and you can communicate that to me, maybe I can give you a direction and maybe I can be an advocate for you, for your family to get the service that you're looking for within the greater community if you're not gonna choose us. And more times than not, they appreciate that, they understand the honesty that we're presenting and where we're at within that, because they do their shopping too. All of these, by law, every cemetery and funeral home has to present a family with a general price list. You cannot turn people away from knowing what your actual fees are. Corporate gets tricky in that way, but you can go out and get all of this information, sit down, and we're really taking the time and understand where we are within that. So I don't know if that's a long way around to answer your
No,
question.
you did, no, and I appreciate that perspective.
Yes.
There are not a whole lot of municipal cemeteries, is that correct?
Not in this area.
Yeah, we're unusual in that regard.
Yep.
And I like that attitude. I like the mission.
And it's a healthy enterprise fund. It's not what I don't lose sleep over how the cemetery's operating with their profitability or retained earnings at the end of the year are. It's well run. It's you know, not something that I'm jumping up and down about. We got to make some revenue here.
Well, and you're dealing with people at a difficult time, and I think that your approach and what you just described really goes along with how we want to do everything in Herndon, so I really appreciate the work that you do. It's, not everybody's cut out for it.
It's better
so.
to hear this speech in this form than
Sure.
where I usually give it, so.
Yeah, exactly. Sheila?
Does everyone know how we acquired the cemetery? Because when the cemetery came to us, Tom Russ was mayor, and it came with a huge bank account, so land, bank account, so it wasn't something we had to go out and purchase to make that.
And we've done a
happen.
lot of improvements over the
Yeah.
years too with the fencing.
Yeah.
It's really.
Entrance.
It's really beautiful.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for all you do. It's not easy.
The next item is a resolution to amend Parks and Rec fees for special facilities use and facility rental fees. This is Cindy Rader.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm not as fancy as David, so. This particular request is only related to the indoor tennis center with our contract time and our random time. So contract time means literally that an agreement between a player and the department for a specific time throughout the course of the season, and we price it by resident and non-resident. We have prime time and non-prime time rates. Random time simply means all those holes in the schedule that are left after the contracts are plugged in, that are then available for people to call on a weekly basis, basically, to pick up the time. So those are always a little bit more expensive than the contract hours, obviously because people are making a commitment. So this is a across the board $2 an hour price increase. It keeps us pretty much in line with the other facilities around the region. There's nobody super close, but there is Ida Lee in Leesburg. There's a facility in Ashburn. So it keeps us in the same range as where those folks are. And I think the last time we did this was 3 years ago. So pretty straightforward.
Questions on the tennis bubble fees? Thank you.
Sure.
And finally, the last one is a resolution to award contract 20-06, Facility of Marketing of Recyclable Materials. And that's Tim Chastain.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So normally I don't present on the contracts, but I wanted to present present you with some information, because this is a bit of a change from what we usually see. And I wanted to go over just to mention the recycling process. I mean, it's not like we process anything, we don't sort anything in the town. We take it to a material recovery facility that sorts it. They give us a tonnage fee, or a rate, very much like the landfill. And then they sell that material as a commodity, and we see that as a rebate or a tonnage fee. And I kind of want to talk about some challenges that we've had. You guys understand we took glass out of the stream and got the purple container. There's some other issues such as contamination, food waste, plastic bags, moisture is an issue. There are a limited number of MRFs in the region, and most all jurisdictions use them. A few other challenges are with the materials. These are just kind of to talk about why we're seeing an increase in our costs in recycling. One thing I did want to note that was brought up last week, our recycling rate is required to be at 25%, and we are holding pretty well at right around 40%. So we have, we're doing well there, and we hope to continue to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Is it 25% of what, or 40% of what?
25% of our,
The total?
Of
The
all.
total,
Yeah,
of
like-
the total of what? Oh.
Right.
All of our
stuff.
Yeah.
Of all the tonnage we take away from a house,
Yeah.
40% of it's recycled.
Yeah, thank you, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. And so I presented this to you when we were talking about our fees a while back. And this just kind of shows you that we used to get a rebate in 2017. We would get a rebate. And you can see how up until third quarter of, well, technically, first quarter of FY '20, we have ended up paying every month for our recycling. And this is not as bad as if we were diverting everything to landfill. I did want to mention that. This isn't quite that bad, but you can see there are issues with how much they're getting from the commodity. And we're seeing that and no longer getting a rebate. So our contract that is before you is with Republic. It says BFI, but also known as Republic. And we are seeing, and based on our sort rate, this contract is going to cost us about $50,000 more than we usually see. As you can see, that the tonnage cost is going from $70 to $98.65. So in our next budget, this pretty much doubles what we're paying for recycling and budgeting for recycling. So this would bring us to about $95,000.
And this is an issue that everybody's facing with
Yes.
the difficulty in recycling,
Yes,
is
this
that
is
right?
Yes.
an issue across the board. I know, well, but yes. Many different jurisdictions, they're doing it all, they're managing it differently. And we're trying to keep on top of how all the different jurisdictions are managing it and making changes and adapting as necessary. Well, yes.
Questions? Sydney?
The purple bins,
Yes.
do we, I gather they are from the county. The county owns
Yes.
those bins. Do they remove them, or do we pay to have them
Well,
removed?
right now, yeah, they remove them and bring one in place. Currently, it's at no cost to us, but that's not gonna stay that way forever.
Okay, and do you
they're
know, because I know glass contaminates, when you're doing single stream recycling, it contaminates it, but when it's separated out, does it have value?
The glass?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, as long as it's used, Fairfax, grinds it down and uses it for bedding, for their pipes. Other places can do that as well, but
But that's.
I'm not sure what you mean
Yeah.
by value.
Like, it can't be
as a
sold.
commodity, no,
Okay.
at $0, yeah.
Thanks.
Sheila.
Also, I'll forward the video. They have a little video that Fairfax County crushes it, and they are getting funding to do that now, but it's kind of like our Wi-Fi, smart cities, that will go away. But they have an incentive to do that now. That's why they're doing it at no cost.
Jen, on the graph, so the recycling rebate is obviously going down, but to me, when it's in negatives, it's implying, so we're now paying for our recycling?
Yes.
Yes, we pay
Yes.
to,
Yes.
what you're saying, that's still better than
It's still better than if it were
what we
going to
pay
the
for the landfill?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what you
We're,
meant.
we're not that bad.
Got it.
Bill?
I was just gonna say, maybe we can be like, in the episode of Seinfeld with, Newman and Kramer when they pack up the post office and weeks ago in Michigan, because they can get double the money they could if they recycle in New York. Just a
You can
thought.
be in charge of that.
Yeah.
Let us
For-
know.
form a committee.
Didn't work out so well for them, but. So-
I am pleasantly surprised that the purple containers are being well used. I thought that was gonna be a lead balloon, people having to take their own glass over to a container, so that's good news.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments on this item? Sheila?
I will say that people are saying, is the town gonna start picking up our glass separately? And I said, well, you need to figure out how much you wanna pay for that service, because we'd have to charge you. People are not happy that they have to take that over there, but
They'll get used to it and they won't
I'm
remember
sure they
now.
could find a high school student or college student that would like to do that for a job.
They
Just pick it up
throw it
and
in the
take it over.
landfill, does that make them feel better about
Great.
themselves?
There's an opportunity.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Do we wanna put any of these, 17, 18, or 19 onto the consent agenda for next week or not?
I would put 17 and 18 on, but I think 19 people really need to be aware.
Well, I was gonna say, I think people need to know Parks and Rec fees are going up on the bubbles, so
We don't have to put any
So
of
we
them,
have
I'm
bubble
just
trouble?
asking the question.
we don't have bubble trouble.
That's
So
right.
wanna leave them all on general?
We
Okay.
move Chestnut Road, the cemetery one? No?
All of it, I'm looking for 4 people to tell me what they would like to do.
I'd be
Chestnut
cool.
Road.
Yeah, I'd be cool with that.
With the
Cemetery,
Chestnut
moving to
Cemetery,
consent?
yeah. Okay, so just 17?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I'm okay with 18 as well.
Yeah, I think the tennis bubble's easy enough to read, but for anyone that cares, I don't feel like that needs a report either. There are folks that wanted the tennis bubble to stay. Can that move to consent?
18,
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
All right, me too.
Okay.
All right, so 17 and 18 will go, 19 will stay, 'cause I do think it would be good to have that presentation on the recycling.
And people are gonna wanna talk about 16.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna.
Oh, yeah, 16, they
Oh,
can't
yeah,
go
I
on.
didn't even suggest that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one item on the consent agenda, which is an award of contract for the 4th of July fireworks. Questions on that?
That should
Ms. Ealer? Yeah.
Did we spend 23,000 last year on it? 'Cause
Similar.
I saw
Yeah, very
some,
similar, yeah.
I got some very bad reviews on last year's display,
Yeah,
and I know.
yeah, that's why we went looking for another vendor.
All right, thank you.
And we were very close to telling you there was not gonna be a July 4th because there was
There
no.
wasn't.
It's very
Other
difficult to
vendors.
find one,
But
because everybody's
I love
already
them.
booked, right? So,
Well, not only that, but there's, it's very difficult to get licensed as a tech in Virginia, and the
Yeah.
people who do this sort of thing are aging out, and nobody's coming up. And so there just are not enough techs to go around to fire on the 4th of July.
Laser show?
Is it within fire?
So-
High-tech laser show.
let's award this
Well-
quickly.
Before they escape.
Saturday this
Saturday.
year, it's gonna be like a big,
Yeah.
big to-do. Exactly.
All
So,
right, are
This is
we,
rain and fog.
I think this is on a separate item, are we doing the fireworks for the 4th? I mean, for the, festival this year?
No.
Not- okay.
Not at that venue, we don't.
I didn't think so, but I just wanted to make sure, because
Okay.
people are
That's
starting
our
to
only-
ask.
Specifically for
Thank
4th of
you.
July.
Okay.
There's nowhere at that venue where we can
Thank
fire
you.
fireworks.
Okay, we have
There is
one
now.
discussion item, which is about the community donations process that we discussed back in December, and Jenny is here for the presentation, continued discussion.
You have PowerPoint?
Yep, let me hand these out. It's just suggestions for, the amended resolution. Because we talked about simplification. We do, I'll rehash the,
the PowerPoint, there's some changes. Oh, thank you. If you take one and pass them down. Because the consensus was from the last meeting that we wanted to at least simplify the reporting requirements. The application process, obviously, you still want to know who's asking for the funds, what they do, how they benefit the town. And that part wasn't necessarily the onerous part, it was more of the mid-year reporting, and then paying twice instead of once. And so the proposed changes to, and this isn't the full resolution, the full resolution refers to these eligibility requirements. So again, with the goal being simplification, what I did was double underlined changes and reordered the application process, because really the transmittal letter is the main thing that they communicate to us. What are they doing for the community? What are the programs? What are their objectives, et cetera? So you can really get a good sense for who's asking for what. And then there'll be one section to give us a budget. How do you spend? What other things are you spending it on? And what other revenue streams do you have? And of course, for organizations that have already gone through this process, there are a couple documents that they wouldn't have to keep giving us every single time. So if you go on the third page, really it's the reporting requirements again that we've lined through. Since it's more of a donation, we've never clawed back any money because we didn't like numbers. Why make people go through the exercise if it's truly just a donation? And then finally, the distribution would be in July once the fiscal year starts. So I wanted to make sure that this captures your thoughts. If you have any other changes, we're leaving the in-kind sections alone for right now. So this is really just focusing on the reporting and simplification of that. Questions, comments?
Takes the burden off of you, I'm all for it, but it's man hours we don't need to have on stupid stuff.
Sheila?
I think it saves the town a lot of staff time, as well as the nonprofits. I mean, takes them a lot of time and energy.
Oh, yes.
And most of them are volunteer run, so.
So how do we provide these grants to nonprofits? It's on first come, first served basis, or what if we get so many applications and they all qualify in all of these? Then
It's a judgment call by the council.
It's up to us.
We throw them all in the mix so
Okay.
you can see. So the letter, once this gets approved, should it get approved next week, the letter will go out. We usually get the same, 6 or 7 that come in. But that's why we didn't want to take away the requirement to tell us about yourself, so that you have the opportunity to see, okay, this is what this organization does for our residents. Is this something that we support?
Does it match the website?
Right.
So just a question, can we put some other requirement, for example, the application should be received by no later than this date or something?
That'll all be in the letter.
Okay.
It's best, I think, not to get terribly specific with dates in the resolution, because those things can shift.
Right.
But it'll be in time for your consideration, obviously, for the
Right,
budget.
so we can marry it up to the budget process. We pick a date to where you have to be feeding those numbers in. We have to start feeding those numbers in, so we pick a
Okay.
date that works for that.
Prior council, prior council,
There's not a lot of wiggle room.
prior council, during one of our discussions, we disqualified somebody because they literally came in that week of our discussion. And it was ridiculous because it was way late.
Because usually they're due by like February something,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
A
They'll
couple
get a
months
couple
before.
extra weeks
Yeah.
this
This came in
year.
April.
But that also helps because there's a process and it's fair that way. It's not arbitrary, like, oh, well, you came in this day and you came in that day and we were in a good mood this day and not that. So it establishes a process that is fully tied to the budget, of course.
Right, and one of the criticisms that we've gotten over the years is that there really is like no criteria. I mean, other than, what's here for your application, but when we decide
Pulse in a pen.
how much or who is getting it, it's really just at the whim of the council, actually. And we've looked at, should we make it more, stringent, and there just really isn't a great way to do it.
So, and I think that this council, when we discussed this, whenever it was, a month or so ago, is looking at trying to make it more predictable for the organizations that we have generally funded for every year. It's not a guarantee, of course, but my question was, I did notice that, you know, HCTV is exempted from some of this because they provide the service, and that's understood. And my question is about Friday Night Live, not about the numbers that are here, but are we, that is something that I can't imagine, that I mean, we can't, unless we tell them we don't want the event to occur any longer, we're gonna have to provide the DPW and HPD support. So, do we need to make them go through the whole process, or do we think we're simplifying it enough that? Because I've just always, I know, I don't wanna make,
No,
I just know that this is
it's
something
not.
that I can't imagine we're not going to
Well,
support.
No, I agree with you. I think that we have been generous in our accounting of
Yeah.
these events. Not just Friday Night Live, but across the
Right.
board, up to and including the winter market that
I was
happened
gonna
just
say,
this
yeah.
December.
Yeah.
We're getting the numbers back now, and the real numbers are blowing out what we
Yeah.
thought it was gonna be. Similarly with Friday Night Live, as Scott has come in with an external eye, rolled up his sleeves, started looking at some of these things, we are spending a lot more than $10,000 to support this effort. And I
Right.
mean, a lot more than $10,000 to support this effort. So I don't mind that being a policy decision of the council. What I do think is incumbent upon me is to deliver to you
The actuals.
the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you make a policy decision of council.
So
And
this is the
that's what
conversation I was hoping
yes.
to spark.
And so that's, Scott has been working on this diligently. He brought some numbers to me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and we kind of crunched through them a little bit, and we're getting closer to being able to present those to you all.
Yep.
I would favor seeing real numbers.
Yes.
I mean, just-
I like real numbers.
Yeah.
Real numbers are fun.
Just,
Lying
put
to
that out
ourselves
there.
isn't gonna help.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and can you also include, because we do a few things with, like, Friends of Runnymede on the cleanup and
Mhm.
Nature Fest?
Oh, we have them all.
And, okay, because
We've taken every
those
event
can
that we
kind of
do.
help, because those are
Yes.
volunteer things that are helping
Internal and
us clean
external
up that
events.
park.
We're looking at them
right.
all, and there's nothing immune from this analysis.
I think it's good to
Right,
get
'cause
that
it-
out there on the record.
no, agreed, it can all be at some cost,
Mhm.
the staff, I mean, it's just not realistic.
Are we also taking into account the lawn replacement that we've had to do in the
Oh,
back
that-
and
we're gonna talk about that too.
Okay, and the winter
Absolutely.
market?
Yeah, that's a real big number.
Yeah, that was a big.
I
one.
assume
yeah.
so.
Yes. And
Well,
not
and
to
I
mention
think
two items, counseling for Jimmy Linton too, but, you know. 'cause
He was so
distraught
upset, I know.
Over losing the
Yeah.
lawn. That's true, he was
Oh, yeah.
heartbroken.
Lawn,
Yeah, for his lawn.
it's a mess.
And I think that this is a conversation definitely to have with the public, because I imagine people are going to be willing to pay for these kinds of things, but they need to know what it's really costing.
Correct. And just hiding that is, or not hiding it,
Well,
just
no,
not
we're
We're not
reporting it
doing
openly.
ourselves any
Right.
favors.
Not doing anybody any favors. I
Making
mean,
it
I want
so-
to be able to have rational conversations.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, our events are getting bigger and
Mhm.
better and more expensive. It isn't something that has just
Absolutely.
ballooned overnight, so.
Absolutely.
And people are very firm that these need to happen, so.
Well, and everyone
they need
thinks
to be
every
firm.
event is the town doing it anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, people think
Right.
that the town puts on Friday Night Live,
Exactly.
no matter how much we talk about the chamber, so.
Yeah, and having the maximums in there is concerning,
Right,
right? So
but we
that's-
didn't want to touch any of this without analysis currently underway.
Well, and this was probably done in like 2010 or 11. It's been a long time
Yeah.
ago.
It says 2016.
Well, but the specific, the changes in the numbers on Friday Night Live.
That was
I remember
10 or
this,
11.
From- I was gonna-
Stephen,
yeah, this
Steve
seems
Benedictus
old.
and I know we were together on it, so that's why I remember.
CPS.
We did it in 11.
Seems
yeah.
dated,
I looked it
agreed.
up, Yeah.
Okay, so is this coming on a future agenda, or is this, or do we?
We wanted to put it on next week's if you're comfortable with these changes, the current ones, but knowing that this still, you know, the Friday Night Live is still kind of where it is, so once we get through that, it would amend this again. What we're trying to do is get the letters out to the community, who wanna apply for donations in enough time to get them back in for consideration.
Was this advertised this past time, or it was on our
We
agenda?
have
So no, so that's my only.
We have to advertise this one?
It's not, it's
The
something that
resolution.
needs to be advertised.
Okay, I just don't wanna
It-
like
it
set
might-
something on the agenda next week without the public knowing.
It currently shows up on the agenda.
as a discussion
as a
item?
discussion item.
Okay, so then if it's
So
moved to a general
put it
item.
on, I would say, I was not aware that we were, put it on, and I'm not sure the clerk was either.
Because I wasn't
My
until
bad.
this morning.
Dare you?
Yeah.
I know, that's me.
Well, I don't know who's, so I just don't know.
I would
Um,
rather wait and
You
do it
wait.
at the next, the first one in February, just because we don't typically slide things
Wait till
like
the
that.
Groundhog
Even though I don't
Season
think this is controversial, I just don't think that's
Yeah,
how
yeah,
we've
that's fair.
typically
Yeah,
done
that's
it.
fair.
Yeah, it's fine.
Jen?
Wait, so aren't we gonna, so at the next work session, that's when we're gonna talk about adjusting this based on the more information you
No,
get?
we need to
Further
get you all
analysis?
to approve on the no more reporting requirements and what's been changed in here, so we get the letter, make
Yeah,
sure
it's
the
not about the
letters are
numbers.
consistent.
It's about the
And
process.
then I need to talk to Scott about when we're ready to roll out the actual numbers on those other events.
Because that's not gonna be ready
No,
for
it's not
the,
gonna be ready
for
for this.
February.
Well, and that
so
really is only
we'll just do
affected,
another event.
Friday Night Live's the only thing that's affected by that, and
Yeah.
the donations. That's a whole different policy question with all the events.
Okay,
and support
my
that we
only
give.
concern is just that we're approving this again with those numbers. Okay, with the sort of caveat
I
that we're gonna
understand.
amend this again later.
I understand,
Okay, got it. I was thinking
So
we were
just make
doing
sure
it
that we
differently.
mention that
Okay,
in the discussion or staff report.
that we
So-
at least mention it and reference it, and reference Winter Market might be added or other events.
Well, that's all
Well,
gonna
not
happen
to
during the
the-
budgetary process too, but during those conversations, we will have actual.
I know in subsequent ones, I know not in the next one, but.
Right. But we're two different things here. We have the
Thank you.
policy for how to get a donation to
Right.
your organization, and then there's the whole, the support staff is costing a lot more than we realize.
But this one
So it's two
bullet,
different-
Right, but
this one
it's
bullet is
one-
kind of tying them to the
Yeah.
two together, and I
Yeah.
see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Right, that's all I'm
So
saying,
we're
I
gonna
just think it
adopt
could be
leave the
confusing
bullet,
to the
and then we're
public.
gonna fix the bullet later.
All right, so
Got
we'll
it.
make sure we
Understand.
clear that up. So we're moving this to the first work session and public hearing in February.
Correct.
Does that give you enough time to get the letters out? in
It
time?
does, I mean, because we'll be in touch with folks, I know folks are asking.
We can't send out the letter with the new policy before the new policy is the new policy, right? Right. Just checking.
Worth a shot.
Thought I'd ask. Okay. Any other questions on, or comments on that?
Just to beat it to death.
Go right ahead, be my guest.
But it's still coughing up blood.
Hypothetically, if there is an increase in this town's cost, where do you see that budget increasing or hitting?
Well, that's
Public
the-
Works and HPD.
Okay, and that'll be reflected in,
Yeah.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Yes. Those are the two usual suspects for Friday Night Live.
Okay,
Right, and most of our events. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
I do believe that brings us to roundtable. Who would like to start us off?
I'll start.
Yes.
I got nothing.
Who's next? Signe.
It was my mother's 80th birthday on Sunday. I threw her the best party ever, and there was a chicken. I just feel that needs
There
to be
was a
said.
chicken?
Yes. There's a lady who has chickens, and she brought it, and
Like a pet, like
But it's a
chicken.
French chicken, it's not
it's
just
a
any
fancy
chicken.
French chicken, and she washed and blow dried it before it came, so it was super fluffy, and it was so quiet. People thought it was a stuffed animal. Anyway.
Live chickens, important. I have chickens at a lot of my parties.
My mom is a country girl, and every time, I have a party, she'll be like, oh, fine, I guess. But we had people singing badly and well. We had 3 birthday cakes. We had.
It's okay, we didn't want to come.
Next year you can come, and you can bring the pretty dog. It was packed. I also wanted to, let's see, I was gonna ask about the lawn, but we dealt with that one. I also wanted to say something. I had not realized how similar my voice is to Jen's until I tried to listen to the recording, and I was like, who said, was that me? No, it was
That
only
was
the
Jen.
Yes,
This is Jen.
so, and I didn't listen all that long, so it could have been, my voice could be the same as a lot of people, but I just thought it was interesting. It's very hard to tell on that
So
recording.
could you two start identifying
I
yourselves before
know,
you speak?
I've listened, because I've listened, because I've missed a meeting or two, and, I didn't notice that, but I'm gonna listen again.
Well, you probably knew what you were talking about. Anyway, I'm fine, thanks.
Or I've listened when
next?
I'm not here, I guess that's part of it, isn't it?
Andrew? Cesar?
I got it.
Nothing? Nope.
No, nothing, thanks.
Sheila?
If you haven't been.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
Saturday,
Oh, yeah.
The mountaintop,
excited.
it's about the last night Martin Luther King was live. It was excellent. Saw it on Friday night, so super good. It was almost as good as the party. The party was awesome. And in case I didn't tell you, Bilah's back in the house, so, and now I keep rotating kids, so now I've got Bilah back.
You were an empty nester for a little while.
But, yeah, it's all over.
But she doesn't like it, so.
Anything else for us?
That's it.
Okay, I don't think I have anything. I took my puppy to Alabama and lived to tell about it, so.
Yeah.
Nice job. All right, well, we do have a need to go into a closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed meeting as provided under section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia for discussion of prospective candidates relative to appointments to boards and commissions? Second.
So moved.
All right, we got Vice Mayor, made by, seconded by Sydney. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? All right, we will take a very, very quick break and
Sit out your 5 minutes.
so.